Hello everyone, this is Martha Mock from the University of Rochester, the Institute for Innovative Transition, and we'd like to welcome you to the webinar, Equity and Excellence, and Using Universal Design to Reach All Learners in Higher Education. This webinar is presented in partnership today with Westchester Institute for Human Development and the Institute for Innovative Transition, and is funded by the New York State Developmental Disability Planning Council as well as the B. Thomas Golisano Foundation. You can find out more about us at nytransition.org. I wanted to also welcome our presenter, Molly Boyle, who has been the project coordinator for the Equity and Excellence in Education project at the University of Massachusetts Boston Institute for Community Inclusion. She has also provided professional development and training in the area of equity and excellence in addition to inclusive higher education for a number of years. She works with the Think College National Group, providing technical assistance nationwide to folks who are working in the area of inclusive higher education. And she's also been doing work with 4 colleges here in New York that are part of our TIPSID project, which is funded by the U.S. Department of Education. So I'd like to welcome Molly. She's a former faculty member and has also been a coordinator of an initiative at Mass Bay Community College in Wellesley, Massachusetts. Welcome, Molly.
Thank you, Martha. It's a pleasure to be here. Hello, everybody. I love webinars, but I really love talking face-to-face to people. So I hope this is as interactive and useful for everybody as possible. Feel free to type questions in the question box. I will pause twice during the webinar to take questions, but I want to make sure if something comes up along the way, you feel free to let me know or let Martha know, and if I miss it, I'm sure Martha will point it out to me. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm excited to talk about this topic, and I'm really passionate to help the folks attending today. To begin, I want to talk a little bit, just to have you understand how we got where we are with this project. We've been funded by the Department of Education, Office of Post-Secondary Ed, since 1999. And when we started off, we were just working on helping faculty work effectively with students. The next version of the project, we were lucky to have this renewed 4 times. We started to look at universal design strategies to increase the access to courses for diverse learners. And then we started working on a project. The 3rd version was developing these core teams at each site. We had sites throughout New England and each state working, and then we also developed our website. The final iteration of this project is coming to a close now, but it's pretty exciting because now we're in the dissemination mode, which is one of the reasons why I'm so pleased to be here today. But what we did then is we created easy-to-use tools online because faculty always said to us, "That's a great idea. We love it. Will you do it for us?" And when we kept hearing that over and over again, we realized that faculty needed tools that were easier, user-friendly, and up-to-date. And we also did a randomized control study that tested the effectiveness of the UCD model, which currently in publication on that. I never want to presume that people know what we're talking about. But when we talk about universal design, the definition we work with is to consider the needs of the broadest range of users from the beginning. That's a definition that works well for us, and I'll kind of come back to this as we talk today. But thinking about the universe as all the learners out there, and how can we address the needs of that broadest range from the beginning. Unfortunately, most of us are in a position where we don't get to start at the beginning. You know, we're revising courses that have been taught before, concepts that are being looked at before, so we don't always have that advantage. When I think about universal design, I also don't want to presume that people know what it means. And I'm hoping that we can talk a little bit today about what we know and what we need to know. I see we have a question, and I can't read the full question. If it's something I need to attend to, Martha, will you let me know? When I say what do we know, I want to kind of ask that generally out there. Universal design, as most people kind of have a general concept of it, comes out of architecture. And it comes out of the notion of things like curb cuts, you know, cutting into the sidewalk to make sure that a wheelchair would be able to cross the street, which, as we know, not everybody uses. Everybody uses the curb cut, whether they're riding a bike or just don't want to step off the curb or are pushing a stroller or a carriage. It's become a design feature in our culture out of architecture. And that also started about in the 1960s, though there's some debate about the origin of this concept. What we also know is that it took a while for people to then apply this to education. And we always give credit to CAST, the Center for Applied Special Technology, because they were really the leaders in trying to talk about universal design and education, where it's been mostly in their realm through K through 12. And starting in about the end of the 90s, people started talking about how do we do this in higher ed? What does it mean with our diversity of learners in higher education? And how do we get people to really think about this in a different way? And that's one of the things I'm excited to talk about. I'm going to pause again because I only see half a question there. I don't know if I need to address it. So when I ask people what we need to know, I'm assuming you really just want me to get down into the practicalities, and that's what we'll get to very quickly, I promise, because that's what we need to know. We need to know how do we practically make this work in higher education, especially given that most faculty are not trained to be educators. How does it apply to today's learners? Well, I asked these questions of you, and you can feel free again to type answers if you wish into the box. But I want you to think about who are your clients and customers and students. What are their goals? What are their primary learning styles? And how do you address the diversity in your audience? When I ask who are your clients and customers and students to an audience of faculty, I get a huge range. Even no matter where I am, I hear some of them are first-generation students. Some of them are older learners. Some of them are individuals with English is not their first language. Some of them are international students. Some of them have really clear goals of getting a degree. Some of them are there because mom and dad told them to go to college. And we really have to address that diverse group of learners no matter what, especially given the diversity of our society today. Goals, like we said, can range, but the other thing we also know that ranges is people's primary learning styles. And when I ask people, what do you believe the student's primary learning style today, I get a wide range of answers, because the truth is that individuals, faculty members don't often know their students' learning styles, and it's something I hope we can talk a little bit about today. But primary learning styles for individuals or youth today, and I say youth meaning people in their 20s, there are visual learners, and that's driven a lot by our media-driven society. And I would say that that is not a huge surprise when we start thinking about it. But then when I switch it around and I ask faculty, well, what do you think the primary teaching style is of faculty today? And I am, in fact, pretty much doing it right now. Faculty teach in a verbal way, auditory way. We speak. And when we do that, we may not be meeting the individuals in our courses. And the next question I have here is, how do we address that diversity in our audience, and how do we approach that? And that's what the real focus of this whole conversation is going to be today. How do we address that diversity? What do we do to try to think about things in a slightly different way to make sure that we are trying to address this diversity? And I hope I'll give you some tips and tools for that. That's my goal. I just got a text that says that people want a copy of the PowerPoint, and I will definitely share that. We'll find a way to get that out to individuals after the presentation. Absolutely. So given what we just talked about, who actually benefits from universal design? The list that we just mentioned, that diverse group of clients, students, users, as we talked about, everybody ultimately will benefit, but if you think about trying to think about making sure that the materials you create are accessible to all, it can help students who speak English as a second language. It can help international students. It can help adult learners. It can help individuals with disabilities. We didn't even mention that when we talked about our list of potential clients. I would also say that it can also help individuals who don't know they have a disability or an unidentified disability. I think that's one of the most important things we often learn, that when students go to college, sometimes either they don't know they have a disability and it becomes apparent to them, or they haven't learned the tools to help themselves with successful access to college. So when faculty take the role of trying to make things accessible, it can really help out those individuals. It can help busy people. Another group that we didn't really mention before is, what about the people who are going to college but also work full-time jobs? It can help, as I said, everyone, but also very importantly, universal design can help an instructor whose teaching style is inconsistent with a student's preferred learning style. By just making sure that things that you do are in multiple formats, you can really and truly achieve a greater range for your students. There we go. I'd like to talk a little bit about access for a second. There was a great promise when Universal Design for Learning came around in the beginning that it would erase the need for disability services. It would erase the need for certain kinds of offices on campus. And I don't really believe that, because it can provide equal access to learning, not simply equal access to information. What it can do, if it's done correctly and thoughtfully, it allows a student to control the method of accessing the information while the teacher can monitor the learning process. It can also, but it does not, very clearly eliminate or remove academic challenges. It just removes those barriers to access. I say that because you may still need certain accommodations for individuals. Universal Design won't accommodate them. But if you're following principles of universal design and making sure, for example, that you share your materials electronically, you immediately increase that access for individuals. The bottom line, I always say, and it's kind of funny because when I meet with provosts or individuals who work at colleges who are trying to think about whether this is a philosophy they want to bring to campus, they look at all my materials, they look at the PowerPoints, they look at the brochures and things that we put together, and then they just look at it and say, this is just good teaching. And I say, yeah, that's exactly right. The truth of it is a lot of faculty don't get taught how to be teachers. And so if I can approach them and give them a few tips about how to make their work more accessible, it generally resonates quite well. So there's a lot of people who talk about universal design and talk about either universal course design is what we tend to use, universal design for learning. Again, I don't really care what we call it. I just care that we are talking about good teaching. There are a lot of principles that are written out there, and they're wonderful and they're incredibly helpful. I just really like to kind of get down to the basics of what resonates with faculty, because we're talking about curriculum, what you're going to teach, instruction, how you're going to teach, assessment and evaluation, how you know what you're taught reach the individual learners, and the environment in which you teach. I try to keep it as simple as possible because I think that, again, resonates with faculty who may not really care about knowing too deeply about theories of pedagogy, but really just want to figure out how do I approach and teach individuals in a thoughtful, comprehensive way. As you can see, my little triangle here kind of reflects that, and we'll talk a little bit about that. The next thing I'd like to talk about is access for all users as another principle when we're talking about all of those elements of curriculum, instruction, assessment, and environment. How do we think about access for all users? How do we think about what it means to be digital? And how do we think about being flexible? The first, these definitely overlap on top of each other in many ways, but I think those are the key principles that are reflected in when I talk about each piece here. I'll bring this back up a little bit later. So course curriculum, to start there, it's pretty straightforward and it's pretty current to what we know about good teaching in 2012, but multimedia materials are really important. The challenge I put out there is making sure that your multimedia materials are captioned. Or the podcasts also have transcripts. Because if you're able to do that, then immediately you're making sure, A, you're providing access in an equitable way, but you're also making sure that people can go back and look at this information and process it in the way that's appropriate for them. Printed or electronic textbooks. I encourage electronic textbooks because of where we are today with technology. It really encourages individuals to do what they want with them. And what I mean by that, if you're an auditory learner, you can make sure you can hear the textbook. If you need things highlighted, you can highlight it electronically. You can also make it bigger, smaller. All the things that you can do, as we know with our computers, is so much easier as soon as something is put in an electronic format. I work on a lot of campuses where they have electronic textbook campaigns where they're pushing all faculty to do that because it also ends up being less expensive for the students. But I just throw that out there as something to think about. Again, posting all your materials online. thinking about those materials in a culturally responsive choice, because when we talk about access, we want to make sure we're also talking about access across cultures. Thinking about a universally designed syllabus, and I'll show you an example of that, but also making sure that college resources are available to everybody. And when I say that, one example we often use that's pretty simple is most campuses are so big and faculty say, well, I tell the students to come to my office hours, but they don't. And one of the surveys we've done over the years has said students don't know where the faculty's offices are. And what about putting a map to your office, or putting an easy way, or taking a class field trip to your office one day? One of the things that people who have done that before have realized that getting to their office may not be that accessible. Thinking about what we're really doing and how we're making sure that how we're communicating things also reflects in creating access. So here's an example, the next slide, of a traditional syllabus. And I'll be honest, this is a syllabus of a course I taught back in 2006, and I thought it was a pretty wonderful syllabus. I had my course objectives, I had my expectations, I talked about all the things I thought my students were going to be doing, my office hours, various things like that. I thought it covered a lot, and I was also kind of proud of it because it was able to fill up just about 2 pages. I thought that was important. But when I look at this now, what I really see is a lot of text. I see a lot of words. I see a lot of what you shouldn't do and what you must do. I don't see a lot of thinking about who my learners were. I see it as more of my description of what I thought I was about to do. If you take that and if you wanted to use our universal design tool, we have a tool that lets you build a syllabus, like I told you to be developed with this project. And you take that and you break it down a little bit. I apologize, this looks a little blurry on my site, but I can show you these in a different way. And you just create some more white space, and instead of just listing when your schedule is, you put it in a grid. And instead of saying who you are, putting a picture of yourself, although that's a terrible picture of me, but maybe it's good that it's blurry. And trying to think about how this looks to a user. If I go back a slide, all this text, heavy text, to going to something that somebody could interact with, A, because it's digital and accessible, and B, because it's just easier on the eye to look at. This is, again, one of the outputs you could use if you used our UCD tool. But I've also seen faculty just trying to use their word processors a little differently to make sure that their syllabi reflect practices such as these. And we have a number of handouts and information on how to make a universally designed syllabi on our website. But I wanted to give you an example to be concrete. So after curriculum, we also talk about instruction and instructional strategies, because that's really what the day-to-day is about what we do. I personally don't really separate instruction from assessment that much, because I think you have to think about assessment before you begin instruction, but I'll talk about assessment a little bit differently in a few minutes. Instructional strategies include administering a learning style survey. Getting to know how your students learn is really helpful. But on the other hand, I encourage you to think about the fact that actually having your students own how they learn is much more important. And I know that you were emailed some handouts for this webinar, and that was one of them I shared with you, which is some tips on getting students to think about their learning styles. What I love about talking about learning styles is it gets people to think about their strengths. It's a strength-based conversation, not a deficit-based conversation, which I find really powerful. I also encourage people to frame each class with an essential or guiding question, understanding where you're going and framing it for them whenever in any way you can. I think that really helps individuals have focus or difficulty grasping the bigger concept, get that easily and put into place for them. Diversify your instruction. This is where I ask the question to faculty, how often should you diversify what you do while you're doing it? And if I were doing this face-to-face at this point, because we're about 20 minutes into the webinar, I would definitely have shown a movie or done something slightly different than just talking to you. Showing movies is not going to be a strategy I was going to use today, because we're on a webinar and sometimes that doesn't work as well. But you should diversify your instruction every 15 to 20 minutes and really change up what you're doing, because that's where our attention spans are. I actually encourage you to at some point show a 7-minute movie in a course or in a group and realize sometimes how long 7 minutes can feel. And imagine how that might feel if you're somebody who's just processing information of somebody lecturing for 40 minutes, 45 minutes with a PowerPoint. Diversifying it is quite powerful for all learners. I also encourage you to look at our website, because we have a tool that you can upload your PowerPoint or upload your Word document, and it will tell you if you're using universally designed fonts, style, etc., to make sure that your presentations and the things that you're sharing are accessible to all. It's a pretty simple tool that if you upload your PowerPoint, you upload your Word document, it'll say, these are not recommended fonts. And there's some research behind which fonts are more recommended than others, mostly about computer compatibility and how different systems can translate those. But it also reminds you that if you're using image, if you're using any kind of table, they may not be accessible once they're transformed on a computer in a different way. Okay, that's a little bit about instruction. And then assessment, I'll also show you a piece of our tool that we have out there. I think we all know this, that one of the best ways to learn if what you're doing is working is to keep asking individuals what's working and what is not, but also changing methods according to what that level of engagement is. The challenge I hear from some faculty sometimes is, well, I have 250 students. Please tell me how not to use a Scantron. Tell me how not to use multiple choice. I don't know how to do it otherwise. And I think that maybe there is a place for those multiple guess things that are out there, but I also think that you can do other ways of surveying your students. One strategy I've seen used is having students, if you don't have a clicker system on your campus, is to have students text or tweet during the course about what they're learning and not learning. If that ongoing assessment, not just maybe the final assessment, they can really let you know where students are grasping the information and where things are being missed. I always, when Martha gave my bio at the beginning, I've been teaching actually for quite a while. I actually taught K-12 in high school. And I've always felt that encouraging students to choose their medium for assessment was the best way for me, because as soon as the student chose a medium that they were most comfortable with, I got the best product. I was always very comfortable with that. And I don't know that every faculty is ready for that, but just trying to push that barrier, thinking about how can you provide alternate forms of assessment and how can that have an equal weight. I've even worked with the writing faculty who say, well, my job is to teach individuals how to write an essay, so therefore I must have an essay at the end. And I say, well, what's the biggest thing that your students struggle in your course? And they may say, organization. And I say, well, what if you had them plan a video or plan a speech? That activity of just planning that can then be reflected later in how they learn how to organize information. And most faculty who have approached it that way have found that quite successful. One of the controversial things we talk about with assessment is offering extra time to all students. If the challenge within there is that you don't just offer an extra 20 minutes to everybody, but if you offer unlimited time, take as much as you need, and really then just structure what the students do on the exam, that would be considered universal design. The offering extra time definitely makes some faculty nervous because that may mean that individuals they don't have any space to do that, and how long will it take? But actually what it really accomplishes is one of the biggest issues with any kind of assessment is test-taking anxiety. And we worked with some math faculty who had students with significant test-taking anxiety, and I suggested they just offer unlimited time and measure how much time it actually took the students, and it actually took them less time or equal amount of time with unlimited time. But the students felt better about it because they felt like they had more time. So it's more of a psychological trick at that point, where even if you offer extra time, you actually accomplish something that you didn't, may not have been the direct intention, but it takes away that anxiety. Again, to come back to that idea of being flexible and digital, e-portfolios are quite wonderful, and I've seen a lot of fantastic things going on with those because it is something that can live on after the college life, and it also can let people be more dynamic in how they express what they're learning. Rubrics is something that can get into long conversations. It can also be a short conversation. Some faculty are very comfortable with it. Some campuses say, oh, no, not rubrics. But I will tell you that if students know what is expected of them, it can be quite powerful. The art of writing a rubric, to me, is truly an art. But I also will say that, that it's a place where it made my experience as an instructor, teacher, whether it was K-12 or higher ed, so much easier. When my rubric was really clear, the students produced what I expected, and I was able to grade in a thoughtful way. This is an example. We have a rubric tool on our website and that you can use, and it's fairly easy. There's a lot of free rubric tools out there, so ours don't look at ours if you don't want to, but there's a lot of free ones out there that have a lot of pre-made rubrics, which are quite wonderful, and I really encourage you to look at them if you're just thinking about making rubrics. But the other thing I will also say is, the one thing I know about everything we've created on Equity and Excellence website and our tools is they are fully accessible for faculty who may or may not have a disability. So I do encourage you to think about ours, where some of the tools I've seen out there on other websites are not fully accessible to individuals with disabilities at the faculty end. I'm seeing a couple more questions, Martha. Is this time to jump in, or shall I keep going?
Sure. We've got two questions from attendees. One person's asking for an example of an e-portfolio.
Sure.
In terms of what that might look like.
There's a number of formats for e-portfolios. I could send you a link to a number of the websites that do them. A lot of campuses have adopted them. But what they do is they let students collect all their work, whether it's in multiple draft form or final draft, and also then put up images and audio, multimedia, whatever else might go along with that in a portfolio of their work. I've seen different departments on campuses adopt these as a final assessment for a major, like a business major or even a nursing major, because then it ultimately, which is ideal, obviously, can then act as a resume. And I've seen e-portfolios being used as resumes. So I can't right now think off the top of my head the names of the brands of e-portfolios, but if you just type in e-portfolio on Google, you'll find a number of them. And if you want to email me later, I can give you some of my preferred ones.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Molly. The other question has to do with sort of some of the earlier conversation we were having around instructors' concerns about teaching to students on the margins at the expense of students, of quote-unquote typical students, and just wondering what you would say to a hesitant faculty member who may bring up some of those concerns. So how might you discuss the benefits of teaching to everyone to also teaching to that middle sort of 68% of learners?
Great. That's a great question. Well, like I talked about earlier, I do really think this is about access, and I do really think this is about making sure that even those individuals who don't know they have a disability have access. And sometimes when people think they're teaching to the margins, they're actually teaching. They're being a better teacher. They're teaching to more individuals in a more thoughtful and comprehensive way. That's hard to get people to understand, hesitant faculty, like you said, Martha. But I think if you ask them to do some baby steps and make small changes and think about this in that way, and they can they will actually be teaching to the majority, making changes for the majority that will impact the individuals who may be on the margin, if we want to call it that way. So I think I'm going to go on if that's okay, Martha.
Yep, I think that's great. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So the last piece of our triangle, per se, that we talk about is the environment. And I ask you to think about the environment in a digital way as well as in a physical way in your classes. And I think that it's pretty amazing when I go into campuses and I see where all the fire information or the emergency information is placed at eye level for an individual who is not in a wheelchair. But individuals who may be at a different height or I'm actually pretty short, so someone like me can't read any of that information, the emergency information that's posted in every classroom. That's one of the things that kind of surprises me, and when I make those little tiny recommendations, people are really thoughtful and saying, oh wow, that could help a lot more people. Why don't we think about that? And then you can also get into the point of how small print some of those signs are that are out there. So trying to think about clear, visible signs anywhere in your environment. Also thinking about like variety forms of registration for courses, or even a variety forms of office hours, like being available via Skype, being available via your phone, being available in different times of day, depending on the type of student you have who has a full-time job and can't make it to office hours between 9 and 12 during the day. I'm constantly surprised at how some faculty definitely move around the furniture in a classroom. In a lot of rooms you can't even do that. But I'm constantly surprised at when you walk around a campus, what you typically see is an individual standing in front of a room and rows of students looking the other, looking up to that individual. And that's not a bad way, but it does mean that maybe, learning is not being diversified, people are not engaging with each other, and it's really a single directional form of learning versus a multiple format, diverse way of learning. I encourage you to post photographs of yourself. If you're not comfortable with that, and believe me, I'm the last person who's comfortable with that, maybe just a photo of your door, your office door, or a photo of where you wish you were, or where you go on vacation when you're not there. It's amazing how students identify in a visual way. I had two male faculty members who co-taught for years, and the students never knew their names. They never knew the difference between them, which was interesting because sometimes they weren't even in the same room at the same time when they were teaching. But by just putting their photos on their syllabus, they felt like all of a sudden the students knew who they were. And pretty powerful. I know when I taught at the college, I would use the Facebook to look and try to learn my students' names because I'm terrible with names. And I was always kind of surprised that we didn't have a book that had the faculty photos in it. Technology-wise, there's so many ways we can change our environment by adding levels of hybrid teaching and including technology. But I do ask you to think about it in a thoughtful way. You don't want to overwhelm students with too much information, and you may need to be the person who discerns the best resources for them. But encouraging people to think about how they can use video, audio, all the resources out there to enhance an experience. One example I'll give here is I was working with some math faculty, and originally with Universal Design there was a thought that, oh, it would be wonderful if all faculty videoed their classes. If they took the time to just video what they were doing, then the students could watch it whenever they wanted to. And I actually, it's a great idea. It's a lot of production on the end of the faculty or whoever their instructional support is, and it's a lot of production for everybody involved there. But again, a great idea. But what I learned by working with this one math faculty is that maybe the way he was teaching was not really going to resonate, whether it was videoed or not. It maybe just had been the way he was teaching that particular kind of equation. But if you go onto YouTube and you Google or videos for how to solve that equation, you will find that maybe 30 or 40 thousand other people have videoed themselves solving that equation. And what maybe you can do is help students discern which one of those might provide an alternate way to solve it that's still correct, but maybe their way of doing it is not the way not the way you're doing it, is not the way the students will learn. And that's the thing I encourage you to just try to think about, is how can we use some of the tools out there and be really thoughtful about helping students know where to get ways for them to learn, so that you don't have to do everything differently or 5 different ways, but maybe help them find ways that alternate ways that may work for individuals that are different than you. Okay, so just before we get into some questions and some thought about how do we do this, bring it to our campus, how do we make this happen, I want to talk a little bit about technology, because that is one of the barriers. Faculty are getting much more comfortable with technology, and there's a lot of support on campuses to help them. But I kind of talk about it. And I definitely stole this. I stole this logo. I give credit to the New York Times. Gadgetwise is one of their columns that I read regularly. But it's talking about how do we become Gadgetwise, and how Gadgetwise do we want to become when there's so much coming at us all the time. I encourage you to think about, what are the tools you are comfortable using, and what are the tools you want to have in your little jackknife of tools as you go ahead. I don't want to get too gadgety, because I really do think low-tech and no-tech are gadgets too. They're ways of approaching teaching. I was working with a faculty member who was teaching some developmental reading classes, and she was retired from a school district, and she had taught 4th grade her entire life. And she was really upset because she wasn't able to work with these students. And I said to her, successfully, she was able to work with them, but she just really felt like she was not being as successful as she was with 4th graders and teaching reading and writing. And I asked her what to do with the 4th graders, and she said, well, we would color code things, we would highlight things, we would get out, just learn vocabulary, we would make pictures. And I said, well, why can't you do that with college students? She goes, oh, I wouldn't want to humiliate them. I wouldn't want them to be embarrassed that I was using, paper and color to help them learn. And I said, well, just try it, because you might be surprised. They just are visual learners and need some low-tech things to get there. And she was definitely a low-tech faculty. She was not ready for any of my gadgets. And she did try that, and she was pleasantly surprised that the students making flashcards and drawing pictures of vocabulary was incredibly successful. And those who liked that were able to continue that on their own. It didn't have to be something she did, but those who didn't like it, were finding other ways to learn. That's where I come to encouraging the students or the peers to be the experts. You can say, I would say there's a lot of beautiful online flashcard systems that you can then put on your smartphones or put on your iPads or your tablets or whatever, but you don't need to learn that. And they're very content specific. You can go and download a whole slew of flashcards with audio and video and graphics on organic chemistry or medieval history or anatomy, but you don't need to know where those are. You can assign a student to go out there and say, hey, can you find some great flashcards that maybe students would want to use in this class, and then share that with the whole group. And students love being those experts. To come back to being Gadgetwise, use what you know. If you're really comfortable with certain kinds of video or audio, then do that. And I remember when I was teaching at a community college, and I'm an NPR addict, and I listen to many shows all the time, and I just they kept resonating for me with something I was teaching at that time. And I kept thinking to myself, oh, I can't bring an NPR into class and play it audio. The students are going to think, they're just not going to get it. They're not going to be into this. I'm too old. But I did it. I did it one day, and I had them listen to a story, and it did resonate because I loved it, because I was passionate about it, and because they really liked me diversifying how we were talking about things. We weren't just reading and processing and doing some case studies. We were actually listening to somebody tell their story, and I think that's one avenue to do that. When we talk about universal design, like I said at the beginning, the definition we work with is to think about how everything can be accessible to everybody in the beginning. And that's really hard to do, but I encourage you, if you're about to start a new project, think about how it can be accessible. When you're retrofitting things, you may need to take baby steps, one new thing at a time. But if you're starting something new, like a new program, a new website, I'd really encourage you to think about what are the principles we want this to be derived from, and really approach that with a universal design. We say to post everything online. I've said this probably maybe 5 times during this, but not everybody's comfortable with the online systems at every university. Not everybody's comfortable with how to approach sharing their work. There is that academic integrity, that's out there, intellectual property. But if you post things in a simple format, the students can control how to access it. I can't say that enough ways. You don't have to worry about too many bells and whistles if you really just try to be thoughtful and post what the students need to know in accessible, simple format. Simple is elegant, and that's one of the things that when people first start thinking about universal design, they may add too much, and that's okay, because as we know, it's kind of like decorating your house or getting dressed in the morning if you're a real fashionable person, which I'm not. But you put on all the accessories and then you take 2 away, and maybe that's what you do with universal design. Let's think about all the things I want to try to do, and then pare it down and think about, am I reaching the multiple users in my courses? So I've given you my overview of universal design with some clear examples from curriculum and instruction, assessment. And I want to stop before we talk about how you might be able to bring universal design to your campus and ask if people have had experience implementing universal design. If you want to, type it in the chat box, take your time, and Martha and I will open up that for you to hear what you have to say. What has been your experience implementing universal design? And we'll also ask questions, open up for questions later, but I just didn't know if people have had experience and challenges that they'd like to bring to the table right now. This is my way of diversifying instruction and hearing somebody else's voice.
So we have one comment here, Molly, from an attendee who's talks about how it's a dirty word on their campus.
Universal design is a dirty word? You know, that's interesting. Okay, it makes me laugh. I've not heard that yet. I've heard universal design. I've heard people say, oh, well, that sounds like we're watering everything down. Or, oh, universal design, that sounds like we're just trying to be like a carbon copy for everybody, and it's everybody doing the same thing, and that's not what we want to do. And again, I don't really care what we call this. So if it is a dirty word, maybe we have to find a new word for it. but what I'm really talking about is when I go to any teaching and learning center on a college campus, people are talking about how do we reach our students, and that's. Is there a word that they use for that? And maybe you could type what that word might be. You know, what are the strategies for reaching more students and trying to approach it that way? And that's always been my experience, is thinking about, well, what other initiatives do you have to make sure you're reaching that diverse group of learners? It is a theory that some people, if they try it in a certain way and it's too programmatic and too rigid, I can see how it could become a dirty word on a campus. But if it's a thoughtful way of approaching how we teach our individuals, maybe it can be, you know, turned around.
And we also have another question related to how would you respond to faculty who want to see evidence that universal design is effective in reaching more students?
Okay, so that's what's exciting. And I didn't put my evidence slides on here because we had some time constraints, but so we did some, as I said, we did some randomized control research in Massachusetts, and we had sites where we implemented universal design over a year, and we measured students over 3 semesters, and we measured faculty, and we were able to achieve what our goal was, with statistically significant, that students who were in the courses that faculty practice universal design were more likely to be retained and complete the courses. And so there has not, I agree with you, there has not been a lot of concrete evidence that this is what works. We have more anecdotal faculty who are excited about it, talking about this is why this is so important. We are very excited about the research that we have that shows that it can have a big impact on that magic word in higher ed, which is retention. So hopefully the magic word retention can outweigh the dirty word. I don't know. Any other questions out there, Martha?
There are. One is specifically related to captioning video has been a challenge for this particular individual, and if you know of any software that's out there that's easy to use and affordable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm terrible with names, so my recommendations about products are limited. So definitely email me, and I'll give you that. I just don't want to say the wrong word because I have done that before, and that would not be helpful. But email me, and I'll tell you what the products are. It is a real challenge for captioning, and that's where I come back to that question about, well, what do? We have all these videos, and most of them aren't captioned. How do we make that accessible? I go back to, well, from now on, from today forward, make sure if you purchase anything on your campus, it's captioned. You know, that's just got to be the decision that everybody needs to make, because that's appropriate. You can pretty easily with YouTube caption your own videos, but you will need a transcript of what has been said. So you may need to assign a student or a volunteer or community service work, I've seen people do, to transcribe what you do. But then it's very easy within YouTube and their own captioning system to caption that way. Again, I think you just have to think about from the start, from this point forward, okay, maybe I haven't captioned all these videos, but from this point forward, I'm going to make sure everything I deliver is captioned, and everything we purchase is captioned, and everything I create is captioned.
Great, and maybe we can add some of those captioning resources to the document that we're going to be putting online after the webinar with the other examples of the e-portfolios.
Absolutely. I was thinking that too, Martha. Absolutely.
We can add that. The other question that we've got here relates to the best method of using universal design or thinking about universal design when teaching an online course.
It's a great question. In some ways, online courses lend themselves to some of the things I've talked about today, which are being digital, being flexible. I think that we have some specific things to think about with that audience. Is sometimes you don't really know how you're reaching your students and what's being communicated in which way. I've seen some really good thoughtful plans for making sure that everything that's online is universally designed, and I can actually share those resources to Martha. But I would also say that thinking about all the things I mentioned before, most of them I say in mind with the same thing of hybrid courses as well as online. Everything applies. Thinking about the environment you're creating, how is it welcoming, how is it culturally diverse, how are your assessment choices going to be accessible to all, how are you assessing their learning style, how are the students owning what they're doing. I taught online for many years, and I think it was incredibly rigorous for both me and the students, but B, it made me a better teacher because I was thinking along those lines so much more thoughtfully because I didn't have that face-to-face interaction.
Excellent. Another person has put some other comments about ways in which they have utilized universal design. One is taking all students' photos on the first day of class along with their names when introducing each other and posting them online in a private link so that everyone can learn each other's names. Also making writing assignments iterative and online via a blog, and requiring the use of images as well in those assignments, as well as making the final projects flexible, whether it's a presentation or paper or both, that high visual learners can have more success with as well.
Those are wonderful suggestions. Yeah, and it's simple things like that. Like I said, these baby steps, taking it one step at a time and thinking about what you want to change, that at least they sound simple to me, that really can have a big impact across the board for all students. Some courses feel more amenable to that than others, so you have to kind of weigh what that looks like. But I want to talk after one more question, Martha, about some of the strategies we've seen successful about building this capacity on campus.
Okay. Great. We do have a comment from Cindy May at the College of Charleston related to universal design being a dirty word, and thinking of a new way of thinking about that, which is pedagogical development for faculty. And obviously pedagogy is one that is very, very big in the higher education world, so sort of rethinking it in that sense. Did you want to continue on, Molly?
I think I will, and we have more time for questions later, so let me just kind of talk about how to bring it to your campus. And thank you to Cindy May for like I said, it doesn't matter what we call it, it's just finding a way to get people to think about how they approach this work. Thank you, Martha. So one of the things we're excited about, and I've been working on this throughout the country, is helping people build the capacity to build and sustain universal design on the campus. And I come in from the outside, and like as Martha mentioned earlier, I've been working with a number of colleges in New York, and I've been working with folks in Hawaii and folks in Massachusetts. And I come on, and I don't live there, so I'm coming from the outside, but I can talk a lot about the things I've talked about today and give a lot of suggestions. But the key to doing this work, as we know over our years of doing it, is to build the movement from within. And while you're building that movement, is to think about the customers, clients, students with and without disabilities. I will tell you, when I started this research project in Massachusetts, somebody said you should approach the Disability Service Office on each campus, and I said, yeah, no, we're trying to get faculty to change. I'm going to the president. And I did. I talked to the presidents of the community colleges, and I talked to the provosts, and I talked to them about how we really weren't trying to sell something or product. This is not a dirty word of universal design. This was about good teaching and learning. And it was really wonderful that we had almost every community college's 14 in Massachusetts agree to be part of our project, because we were able to emphasize it was for everybody. It was just a strategy that really could work for everybody. We got the administrative support from the beginning, and it was not that hard because people are often looking for professional development opportunities for faculty. And it can be across the board. It can be the eager new faculty, as well as the faculty who are closer to retirement and ready to think about new ways of teaching and learning. What we always did is we found champions and mentors. We found the people who are already doing this. They're probably already pretty well respected on campus because they were already thinking about teaching and learning in a way that was appropriate to their campus. Every campus is totally different. Even the ones that look the same in the community colleges in Massachusetts, who may have a similar demographic or population, have totally different climates and atmospheres. And I always want to respect that by finding the champions and mentors that already work well on the campus. And then what we did is we created a core team, and this is what has been incredibly successful, and we've written about this a bit in our work, and I'll talk a little bit about that core team because I think that is how it becomes a sustainable movement. It must come from within, like I said, and when you develop this core team, you start with a small group of people interested, invested, and then we had them commit to a series of meetings, and then we ensure that each meeting kind of functioned as a workshop, and the workshop was, what are we going to change, or what do we need to know, or what do we want to learn now about this topic? And it really changed according to the institution, according to the group of people and what they're trying to do. What was wonderful, and I can only tout my research and my project as much as I experienced it, but I was always surprised about the faculty and the staff who were on the core teams. We had a semester of them, and I believe that if you ask anybody to do above and beyond their job and be part of this work that we were doing, we stipend them, and we did stipend them. The second time we came back to them, I said, we hope you want to continue, we'll stipend you again. They did not talk to each other, but every single college I worked at said, no, we don't want the stipend on our core team. We want to give that money to more faculty to get them to come to more workshops and do things, which was pretty powerful to me because they really did believe that they were doing their job as being part of this team. It made sense to them. It's a peer support network that was designed to help faculty learn, but what it did is it felt like it was already part of their job description to be on there. And that's what I talk a little bit about how to start it is each core team should have about 3 to 5 consistent members. And I say that these are what we learned. They can be faculty. Faculty champions are wonderful. But what we learned is really helpful is to have people that's already in your job description to support faculty. So that might be informational technology, it might be a librarian. I had a provost, an assistant provost on our team because he was so excited about this topic. I had people from disability service offices, your cultural or campus diversity office. We had deans from the Student Academic Affairs. Sometimes we had people from the counseling services. Not every campus has a Center for Teaching and Excellence, but it always helped to have them there because then they could communicate what was going on their campus already and how this could match within there. It was pretty powerful because, again, by them rejecting the stipend, which is always a surprise to me with faculty or staff, is they were saying, no, we really value this and this is where we want it to go. One of the campuses I worked on, I was pretty excited because when I got there, they were just about to start creating a Center for Teaching and Excellence. And then they, even though the project has ended on these campuses, they have now made Universal Design Principles the center of their Teacher in Excellence. So you walk into their Center for Teaching and Excellence and it's all about universal design. So it was pretty exciting to see that they were able to build that from the start. And then here's the last thing I'll say, well, 2 more things to say about the core team is for the responsibilities, we had them spend this first semester just learning about UCD. Some of them went to our website, some of them used our tools, some of them brought me in to do a bunch of series of things that were of interest to them. And then the second semester, they worked to advise faculty. And faculty would come to them kind of as like a problem-solving environment. Faculty aren't generally comfortable doing that, so they had to kind of build that trust and make themselves known on campus. So a lot of them picked a project of promoting the faculty that they saw doing great things with poster sessions, newsletter, websites. I even had a campus who made a deck of cards. They took some of the principles of universal design and put them on cards, and they were kind of spreading them around campus because they felt like it was an interesting strategy. And then the next semester, they started putting faculty photos on the cards and putting the example that the faculty did to represent that key principle in universal design. It was kind of cool. It's like a playing cards that were being shared around and people were excited to get their name on a card. Here's a graphic representation of what I'm talking about, a semester of core team development, a second semester of faculty and the core team working together, a third semester of new faculty working with the UCD team, and then, it just keeps building. It goes around and around, and what we've seen is that some people stay on with the team, and then others are added into the group, and some people rotate out, but that's kind of typical on a college campus. Coming toward the end here, this time has gone by quickly, but I want to point you to our website. It's being revised as we speak, but if you go to our website, you will have access to everything I mentioned today, including the tools that I told you about, and including some information about how to develop a core team, including some strategies that we hope to, we're actually, might have been updated last week, I haven't looked at it today. We also have some examples about how to do some resource mapping, some syllabi, and contact information, so you can feel free to get in touch with me. This is what our tool looks like, and you can link to that from our website. And it's a very exciting tool that a lot of faculty have found useful, but again, if you're not ready for going online with everything, just some baby steps. Keep it low tech, keep it no tech, but just try to think about all the learners that we have out there. And I have ended with 5 minutes on my clock, Martha, for some questions.
Great, and we've got 2 more questions that we haven't gotten to yet. One is the idea of connecting universal design framework for post-secondary education faculty and administration, whether or not you suggest introducing the CAST guidelines or introducing it informally.
I've seen both happen. I would say informally first, and if you have a strong enough team of people, then go into CAST. The CAST has wonderful pieces, but the language can be overwhelming for some faculty. Unless you're an education faculty, I found people don't necessarily want to talk about the specific details of the pedagogical approaches. So that's my experience, and I've heard that from the field. I've heard people who have talked to CAST and thought about working with them, and then hear me speak, and then say, "Oh, okay, this I can bring back to my faculty. CAST was a little too much, and I'm an education faculty, so I love it, but I don't know if it's going to resonate across the campus." So I would stay, informally or formally, but without all the lingo. That's, I guess, is what I would say.
Okay, great. And then another question related to a peer evaluation rubric, whether or not you know of one that exists that instructors can use to sort of measure the degree of universal design implementation with fellow instructors within their classrooms.
That's a really interesting idea. I have not heard of one, but I do know of another project in Colorado that may have developed something similar. So again, let's put that on my list, Martha, to look up and see if there's other resources. But I really do like that idea. We did, when we surveyed students in our 3 semesters of our research, we surveyed students and faculty, and then we also had faculty working with each other to talk about what we're going to improve and various ways of that. But I don't know of a specific tool, and that might be fun to develop. We do have some checklists that people use individually, and because I tend to be a self-evaluator better than a peer evaluator, and maybe they could be adapted that way as well.
Okay, all right. So we'll add that to our list of the pieces of information that we're going to be putting on our website and the link to the webinar.
Absolutely.
Do you have any final comments, Molly, before we wrap up?
No, if people have any more questions, my contact information is right here. I am, as you know, the project coordinator for this project in addition to a number of things, but that is my email. You can reach me directly. I do one-on-one consultations for people if they just have some questions. I'm more than happy to talk to you about it. That is my phone number, and I would be delighted to hear from anybody. I do have a fun quiz. If I could give away a prize, does anybody know where my picture was taken? Last time I did a webinar like this, people knew right away. You type it into the chat box, see if people know. We have a minute to spare, right, Martha?
We do. Oh, I've got some guesses here. Oh, Hawaii, California coast, California.
All right, you're getting hot on California coast, but where?
Where? Baja, California?
No, not quite.
Route 1, Route 5, Sonoma?
Well, yes. Well, the PCH is good. Yeah, you're getting close, but there is a specific area. One more try. Not yet? Not yet?
That's all we got.
Oh, okay. Well, you guys are very good. Thank you for humoring me. It is Big Sur. So you were right on the PCH, up near Sonoma, but a little further south. But a real pleasure to be with everybody. Please don't hesitate to contact me. This was an overview. I do much more involved presentations and would be delighted to work with any faculty or staff out there who have any questions. Follow up.
Great. Thank you so much, Molly. I'd like to thank the international folks who joined us from Israel today, and also thank folks from WID, Kathy, as well as Naomi Brickle, for supporting this webinar. We want to encourage all the attendees to complete the poll, the satisfaction poll related to your satisfaction today as well as your interest in future topics related to inclusive higher education. Thanks, everyone. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.